Alright, yeah, welcome back to some more Magic Arena, and this week we're taking in two of the arena, a green-black Elves list. So, what this deck likes to do, like every other Elf deck in Magic the Gathering, is it likes to generate a lot of mana, and we're going to be using all of that mana to cast more mana-generating Elves, and it's going to spiral out of control from that point. I believe most people like to call this archetype Elf Ball, because it just snowballs out of control. So, let's start off with how we actually generate all of the mana. We've got plenty of mana generating creatures here. We've got Llanowar Elves as a 1-drop 1/1 that generates 1 green mana. Really solid, perfect thing to start off the game with. We then have 4 copies of Druid of the Cowl as well, our second best mana generating elf. 1 and a green for a 1/3, which gives it a decent block against a lot of aggro cards as well. There's a lot of 2/2s and 2/1s and things like that, so Druid of the Cowl is basically going to eat some removal against the aggro decks, which is pretty much what we want anyway, and generates 1 mana if it doesn't die. Finally, we have 3 copies of Elfhame Druid just to top it all off. 1 and a green for an 0/2, so it is the worst of all of them, but it generates 1 green mana. There is a kicker side to it, though it is not relevant at all in this list, so you can basically just consider this one a 2 mana, generate 1 mana, same as Druid of the Cowl, but with less good stats. We then have other ways of generating mana in this list. We have Marwyn the Nurturer to top it all off as well, as our mana generating lord, you might say. She is the lord or lady of mana. 3 mana for a 1/1 legendary creature elf druid. When another elf enters the battlefield under your control, you put a 1/1 counter on Marwyn the Nurturer, and then you can add an amount of mana equal to Marwyn's power. So essentially every single elf that enters the field generates an extra mana. In the case of Clancaller as well, because we are pumping up Marwyn, her power just on Lord effects. Same for the Vanquisher's Banner. That also counts as the extra mana as well, so it's really nice stuff. Marwyn is basically our Gaia's Cradle in creature form, and she generates a hell of a lot of mana. It's not unheard of for her to be a 20/20 or something higher than that, which is basically the queen of chump blocks at that point. So yeah, Marwyn is basically one of the last ways, in creature form anyway, we have of generating mana. Not creature form, we have Growing Rights of Itlimoc. 2 and a green for a legendary enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand, and the rest onto the bottom of your library in any order. Which means we actually have some use of it initially. We get to go and grab a creature. We're running 28? Yes, 28 creatures in this list, so the chances of Growing Rights whiffing are quite low, so no worries there. There's only a few cards in our deck that would actually whiff this one. Things like Find, Assassin's Trophy, Vanquisher's Banner, and that's essentially it, and another Growing Rights. But if we manage to get 4 or more creatures onto the battlefield while having Growing Rights out, we actually flip it into a better version of Gaia's Cradle. So for those who are in Legacy and EDH, you'll know Gaia's Cradle already. For those who don't know, it's basically a land that adds 1 green mana for each creature you control. However, Itlimoc actually also has a second ability to add 1 green mana on its own as well, so really nice stuff there. We can basically go off like crazy with the Growing Rights, and it's just one of the best ways to generate mana in this deck. So, other than that, how are we actually planning on snowballing out of control? Well, we have 2 versions of the same effect. We have Beast Whisperer and we have Vanquisher's Banner. Beast Whisperer is the simplest way of doing it. 2 mana for a double green, 2 mana and double green, sorry, for a 2/3 elf druid. It says whenever you cast a creature spell, you draw a card. So, if you imagine when we're playing our Llanowar Elves and our Druid of the Cowls, we're basically ramping up mana so that we can cast our Beast Whisperer. Once we have it out, we have some excess mana, and with that excess mana, we can use it to cast more elves that generate mana, which then help us cast more elves that generate mana. So as we're drawing extra cards off the top of the deck, hopefully we're hitting elves, and with those elves we're actually tapping our old elves to play them to draw into more elves. So we basically go as wide as possible. I think this is one of the more go wide strategies that you could possibly get in the format without just going like infinite creatures, that kind of thing. This is basically going to flood the board with creatures. I suppose tokens probably goes a little bit wider, but this one does it with actual creature cards, which is fun. So, Beast Whisperer has that effect, and so does Vanquisher's Banner. This one's a 5 mana artifact, however, but it does have the additional benefit for 1 extra mana and no mana tax in terms of colours. Not that it would really matter. But it says that creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. So we can choose Elves, and that pumps up all of our Elves as well. It allows our Clan Callers to become a little bit bigger and survive a lot more stuff. It allows Marwyn to generate more mana, and just allows all of our Elves in general to start beating down. Our Elf-Imps can actually block and deal some damage, as an example. So that's basically what we want to be doing. We want to generate some mana, we want to draw some cards, which allow us to play some more creatures. So, as far as utility creatures are concerned in this deck, we have 4 copies of Thorn Lieutenant, 2 mana for a 2/3. When it becomes the target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, create a 1/1 Elf Warrior creature token, which means it's very hard to deal with, perfect against burn matchups. A 2/3 allows us to basically force our opponent to use Lightning Strike on it, which will generate as a 1/1, which is probably going to get pumped by a Clan Caller and stuff like that. So, generating more blockers for us is always wonderful. And the second ability is very important because some people don't remember it's there. I actually had a game when I was grinding a couple of weeks back. I've had this deck quite a while and I've just not played it. Where I actually played against Dan's Game, who is a pretty famous Twitch streamer. And I ended up beating him mainly because he forgot that the Thorn Lieutenant's +4/+4 was there. So yeah, it's something that you got to keep in mind. We are generating a lot of mana, so Thorn Lieutenant is the perfect mana sink for that power. You know, imagine Itlamok generating mana for each creature, and you haven't blocked a Thorn Lieutenant. That's a lot of +4/+4 triggers ready to go. As we mentioned, we also have Clan Callers as our Lord effects as well, because no Elf deck would be complete without Lord effects. No Tribal deck would be complete without them either. 2 green mana for a 1/1 that gives all other Elves you control +1/+1. And then you also have the special ability, another mana sink in the deck, 4 and 2 green to tap, search a library for a card named Elvish Clan Caller, so one of its sisters, and put it onto the battlefield and shuffle your library, which pretty much means every single turn we're going to grab one of our Elves out of our deck, most likely anyway. And it's just going to allow us to snowball out of control and give some of these weaker creatures that we've got here some serious firepower. So eventually we'll probably have something like +4/+4 for all of the Elves, which is pretty sweet. Llanowar Elves is a 1 mana 5/5. It's pretty cool. So that's one of our utility creatures. We also have 2 copies of Okran Assassin as well, a 1 black and a green for a 1/1 Elf Assassin with Death Touch, and all creatures able to block Okran Assassin do so. So if you imagine a board state where it's very stalled, you know, they've got too many creatures, maybe it's a token deck or something like that, and they're holding back all of the stuff. We play Okran Assassin, and the following turn we get to attack in with our lethal board. And what it does is it basically forces all of our opponent's creatures to automatically block Okran Assassin. They've got no choice about it, which means every single other creature in our deck is then uncontested and swings straight to face, which is wonderful. The Death Touch is also really important as well, because it allows us to pick and choose whichever creatures are going to die. So if we don't actually have a lethal creature board, or we need to hold back some stuff that stops us from swinging for lethal, then we could just swing in with the Okran Assassin, and what that'll do is force everyone to block the Okran Assassin, and we can actually choose which creature dies, because Death Touch says that any amount of damage a creature with Death Touch deals to a creature is enough to destroy it, which basically means we only have to deal 1 damage to a creature in order to kill it. So if we're applying Lord effects to Okran Assassin, making it a 5/5, the rules still apply. 1 damage is enough to kill a creature, which means for every Lord effect applied to Okran Assassin is an additional creature that this is going to kill when we swing in with it. So if it is a 5/5, we're going to kill 5 creatures with just 1 Okran Assassin as well, which is pretty solid. So even if we're not going to win with it, it is a really good removal spell in its own right. It is interruptible, but, you know, we're going to be swinging in. They've probably used all of their removal trying to get rid of Clan Callers and Beast Whisperers anyway, so this should hopefully stick around long enough to kill our opponent, and likely will come down to a top deck at that point. So that's essentially the creature base. We also have 3 copies of Assassin's Trophy here as one of Golgari's best removal spells. Black and a green for an instant speed. Destroy target permanent an opponent controls. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle their library. So we can pick either planeswalkers, artifacts, enchantments, creatures, anything at all that we want to choose will die to the Assassin's Trophy, which basically means that we have a catch-all in our deck, which is wonderful. It's always a nice thing to have. So we're going to be running our Assassin's Trophies there to just catch anything that's going to be too much of a problem. Ixalan's Bindings on Beast Whisperers or any of our elf dudes. Planeswalkers like Teferi if we need to buy some time. Flyers that we don't actually have a main board answer to, so Assassin's Trophy is the answer there. Also, Okran Assassin can also kill a flyer as well, so yeah, Assassin's Trophies, our best route to take care of anything that our deck can't normally handle. So, other than that, we have 2 copies of Finality as well. I'm a little bit unsure about this particular card, because Finality is not too useful in our deck. It's a win more, to be honest. Unless, of course, we're, like, severely losing. And if we're severely losing, the game's over. One thing I will say about this deck is it can be a bit of a glass cannon. If you can't find your Vanquishers banners and your Beast Whisperers, you're not going to do a great deal. So you need to make sure that you have at least one of these in your opening hand, and hopefully you can protect it long enough to actually snowball out of control. So, that being said, we have Find in here, which allows us to return 2 target creature cards from our graveyard to our hand. So it allows us to return the Beast Whisperers and maybe the Marwins or any other creature that we want, and basically reset our engine all over again. We have the Finality on this side. As I mentioned, it's not too useful. 6 mana to put 2 counters on a creature you control, then all creatures get -4/-4 until the end of turn. So it is a superb board wipe. However, it's very unlikely to not wipe our board clear, so we're not going to be using that side when we're winning, and if we're losing, it's probably already too late. You never know, you could probably come back from it, but we're mostly playing this here for the Find side of it, to return our engine to the game, essentially, with Beast Whisperer. So that's the main deck. The mana base is reasonably simple. We have 4 copies of Woodland Cemetery, enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a swamp or a forest. So we have 12 forests and 1 swamp. The black is a splash in this list, so that's something to be aware of. We only need 1 black mana to make the entire deck run, which is why we've got 1 swamp. If we do get Assassin's Trophied, then we can pull that swamp out if we need it. So, something to be aware of, but we are also splashing using our shock lands and our check lands here. Overgrown Tomb is a swamp and a forest, so it does allow Woodland Cemetery to come into play untapped. Really wonderful combo. Enters the battlefield, you can pay 2 life. If you don't, then it enters the battlefield tapped. So if we want that explosive turn 1 Llanowar Elves play, we will have to pay 2 life, but that should be fine just to get 2 mana on the board in turn 1. Really nice amount of ramp there, and usually it is worth it. And we also do need these as well for our Assassin's Trophies, Okran Assassins, and Finalities, and a little bit of our sideboard as well. I'm going to switch over to this layout. This layout's a little bit better for the sideboard. Excuse me, for the sideboard. 4 copies of Duress. Not entirely sure about this card because we don't often have black mana on turn 1, so I'm not entirely sure that this is the best sideboard option for us. I would like some discard options, but Duress, I'm not entirely sure that it is the option for us. But anyway, it's a 1 black mana sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand, you choose a non-creature, non-land card for it, and that player discards that card. So if we were able to get the turn 1 Duress, we can actually remove out of our opponent's hand any kind of removal for our opponent's creatures. We have plenty of answers to our opponent trying to remove our creatures anyway, so I think Duress is the flex slot in this sideboard. I'm not entirely certain that it is the best card for the situation, but I'm not sure what I'd replace it with either. So, for now, it's going to be in here. We have 3 copies of Shaper's Sanctuary. As I mentioned, this is kind of our protection from removal. 1 green for an enchantment, so this is likely to be the thing that we want to drop down on turn 1 if we can. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. So as I mentioned, we want to be drawing cards. So if our opponent is removing our Beast Whisperers, the least he can do is let us draw a card. So if we have this down, any kind of Ravenous Chupacabras, Moment of Cravings, Deadweights on our screen right there, any kind of removal or anything that targets our creatures, even something as simple as a Merfolk Trickster, which is forced to target a creature, that will draw us a card. So it really hampers some of the power level of our opponent's cards. You know, when they're playing their removal spell, they really want it to be a 1-for-1, but this actually prevents that from being the case. You know, they remove one of our creatures, we just draw another one, so it's really solid. 3 copies of Kral Harpooner. Now this is not an elf, something to keep in mind. However, it is very useful to us all the same. 1 and a green for a 3/2 with reach, and it has undergrowth, so the undergrowth part is the important part here. When it enters the battlefield, you choose up to 1 target creature with flying you don't control. Corral Harpooner gets +X/+0 until the end of the turn, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Then you may have Corral Harpooner fight that creature. So what this is essentially extra removal for flyers. So we can take out things like Lyras, Enigma Drakes, Crackling Drakes, Niv Mizzets, that kind of thing. It can be susceptible to removal, but it's not something that we really have too much choice over. We're going to have to go for it. And 2 mana is a reasonable amount. In order to actually take down the Drakes, we are going to have 1 creature die at some point, but against the Drake decks, they're usually shocking off creatures in turns 1 and 2, so it shouldn't be too difficult for this Harpooner to come down with the 4 power that it needs to actually fight a creature. So something to keep in mind there, but it is nice. We also have the extra Assassin's Trophy to deal with extra Planeswalkers as well. Want to be able to catch all. If this is useful, we want to bring in more copies of it. If it's not, we'll probably be bringing them out. So, speaks for itself. 2 copies of Reclamation Sage. I'm not totally sold on these, since we do have the Assassin's Trophies, but I think it's just a nice little bit of extra value in there all the same. If we only have to deal with enchantments and artifacts, then I'm going to bring in the Reclamation Sages over Assassin's Trophies anyway, because they are elves, and therefore they do combo with the deck. When in a battlefield, they get to destroy an artifact or an enchantment, so 3 mana 2/1 is reasonable, I guess. It's not great, but, you know, it just basically will be a cantrip as well, so solid stuff there. Finally, we have 2 copies of Poison Tipped Archer. If we do suspect that our opponent is going to do board wipe shenanigans, Ritual of Suts, Golden Demises, things like that, we bring in the Poison Tipped Archers, 2 a green and a black for a 2/3 with Reach and Death Touch, and it says whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. I'm actually debating whether or not I should actually go down a Reclamation Sage and up a Poison Tipped Archer, or maybe down a Duress. This is still a flexible sideboard. I'm not entirely sold on it, but this is the one that we're going to go with for the video anyway. If you do have any suggestions, obviously, leave them down in the comments section below for either future deck series on this list, if I do decide to come back for it, and also anyone who might want to build this deck as well. It's really useful for them to hear other people's opinions on the cards that they should include in their main deck. And of course as well, sideboards are always subject to change when the format changes, so should your sideboard. So even if I'm not entirely sold on this sideboard, you should probably be changing it and tweaking it based on the metagame that is in your FNM or in Arena at the time. So, you know, if you don't need board wipe protections, then out comes the archers, things like that. But most of the times, I think most of this stuff is what you want. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for today's episode. I'm going to cut off the episode because I'm losing my voice and I'm about to start coughing. So, if you have enjoyed this episode, then be sure to check out the matches that should be following shortly after this. There'll be a link at the end of this video and as well in the description below, as well as a text deck list as well if you want to export this to Magic Arena to play it yourself. So, thanks very much for watching, guys. Like and subscribe, hit the bell icon, you know the drill, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.